Lincoln Hayes sat in seat 1A, nestled into the plush leather of first class with the poise of a man who lived in rarefied air. At 48, Lincoln was a name uttered with reverence in the boardrooms of global tech conglomerates, the founder and CEO of a wildly successful cybersecurity firm that had transformed digital infrastructure in the last decade. With his usual stoic demeanor, Lincoln had pre-ordered his preferred in-flight meal, lobster bisque followed by filet mignon, a selection he had never had to second-guess in his many travels. It wasn't about indulgence. It was about consistency, precision, respect. These weren't luxuries to him. They were expectations built over years of excellence, and they were always met. Until today, when the flight attendant returned, her expression polite but strained, she offered him a forced smile and leaned closer. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice too neutral. "We're out of the lobster and steak option. We can offer you a sandwich from the standard menu." Lincoln blinked. Once. Slowly. His eyes did not leave hers, but something in his posture stiffened. Not because he didn't get the meal, he wasn't a man thrown by trivial inconveniences, but because of the way she said it. Dismissively. Like it didn't matter. Like he didn't matter. Her smile never reached her eyes, and her apology was hollow, as if she'd already decided he was undeserving of anything more. He scanned the cabin subtly. The other first-class passengers, all white men in sharp suits, were enjoying exactly what he had ordered: caviar, prime cuts, fine wine. It was clear. This wasn't a supply issue. This was something else. Lincoln Hayes wasn't just another CEO. And he sure as hell wasn't just another passenger. He was the only black man in the cabin, and as the seconds ticked by, the context crystallized. This wasn't about lobster or beef. It wasn't about meals or menus. It was about erasure, about subtle exclusion wrapped in customer service language. It was about a message. And Lincoln was fluent in decoding messages, especially the kind no one said out loud. He didn't show his anger. Lincoln never did. His was a quiet kind of fire, the kind that burned slow and bright and always found its target. The sandwich placed before him, a sad, soggy assembly of deli meat, sat untouched. The cup of lukewarm water glared up at him like an insult. Around him, other passengers clinked champagne glasses and chuckled in comfort. Lincoln had experienced this too many times in boardrooms, meetings, even in his own company's early funding rounds. The polite belittling, the subtle gatekeeping, the coded language of exclusion. But the skies were supposed to be above all that. Straightest Air prided itself on elite service, diversity in their brochures, and treating first-class passengers like royalty. Not today. He glanced at the attendant, who had already moved on, smiling warmly at the man in 1B. There was no warmth for him, just a quiet decision. You don't belong here. But Lincoln Hayes didn't beg for belonging. He built empires. He reached for his phone, fingers typing with the precision of a surgeon. The message went to Marcus Ellison, his executive assistant, a brilliant former analyst Lincoln had poached from a Fortune 100 firm. Initiate internal audit protocol. Flight 917. Crew IDs required. Confirm readiness. It wasn't about a meal anymore. It wasn't even about the flight attendant, not exactly. It was about a system, a culture, a rot that had been ignored because it was quiet and palatable. Lincoln wasn't going to raise his voice. He didn't need to. While the cabin attendants continued chatting and pouring drinks, unaware of what had just been set into motion, Lincoln reviewed the merger pitch on his tablet. A $2.1 billion deal he'd be finalizing in Geneva the next morning. His focus was unshaken, but now it came with an edge. Behind every line of the proposal, behind every strategic slide, ran a current of resolve. Change would happen. One way or another. Miles away, Marcus was already running queries on Stratus Air's internal employee database. He had clearance. Lincoln made sure of that. Every airline Lincoln partnered with for corporate travel had signed a clause permitting background and performance checks of all assigned staff. That clause, buried deep in the contract fine print, was standard. Most never triggered it. Until now. By the time the plane crossed into European airspace, Marcus had found what he was looking for. The flight attendant who denied Lincoln his meal, her name was Jenna Caldwell, had been cited 3 times in the past 18 months. Rude behavior, hostile tone, a formal complaint from a Middle Eastern diplomat. Nothing ever escalated, but the pattern was there. One complaint had even noted differentiated treatment towards certain guests. It wasn't a mistake. It was a habit. And now it was one that would cost her everything. Lincoln pressed the service button again, and this time a different flight attendant approached, an older man named Charles, his name tag polished, his demeanor cautious. Something in his eyes said he knew the atmosphere had changed. Lincoln spoke calmly. Steady. I pre-ordered a premium meal, he said. I was told it wasn't available. Others received it. I was not. Charles swallowed hard. Sir, I can check again for you. Lincoln raised a hand. That won't be necessary. I understand perfectly. Please inform the crew that upon landing, they are to remain on board until cleared by airline personnel. Charles nodded, flustered, and hurried off. Lincoln turned back to his tablet, untouched sandwich still on the tray. He didn't need to eat. He was already full, on purpose, on certainty, on the clarity that comes when someone crosses a line they didn't even realize existed. By the time Flight 917 touched down in Geneva, the tarmac looked different. Two sharply dressed airline executives stood at the gate with tablets in hand and guarded expressions. Behind them, a quiet HR team waited just out of view. The kind of team that only showed up when a reckoning was underway. Lincoln stepped off the plane, calm as ever, nodding once toward the waiting officials but not stopping. He didn't need a confrontation. His actions spoke louder than any raised voice. Within minutes, Jenna Caldwell and two other crew members were pulled aside, their faces confused at first, then tight with dread. Their personal files were locked. Investigations launched. Termination protocols initiated, not because Lincoln demanded punishment, because the system demanded accountability, and Lincoln had simply flipped the switch. The world wouldn't hear about this in a press release. There would be no Twitter thread or viral TikTok. But inside Stratus Air, the walls were already shaking, and Lincoln Hayes? He was already halfway to his hotel, reviewing the final terms of the Geneva merger with Marcus on a secure video call. Send the audit summary to Stratus's board, Lincoln said. And Marcus, make sure their diversity claims match their hiring records. If not, we revoke all future corporate travel contracts. Understood, Marcus replied, eyes already scanning reports. Lincoln leaned back in his seat, watching the Swiss landscape blur past the car window. Sometimes power didn't need a megaphone. Sometimes it came in silence, wrapped in precision. A seat in 1A had never looked so powerful.